What do you do as a developer if you're suddenly thrust into the role of managing a software project? Wondering how to go from sitting behind a screen writing code to being out in front leading a group of people? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. And in this episode, I'll be sharing the 7 P's framework that I'm confident will help you transform from programmer to successful project manager. Starting with the first P, you're not a project manager, you're a problem manager. A project is just a collection of many individual problems. In order to move your project from the start line to the finish line, you're going to need to break the project down and deal with each individual problem one at a time. Those problems are going to be many. First of all, in any software project, you're going to deal with technical issues. You'll have errors, coding errors, runtime errors. You're going to run into performance issues, issues with latency, issues with throughput. You're also going to run into system issues, issues where systems aren't compatible, where you can't find the right drivers to connect to your databases. You'll also run into resource limitations. These could be limitations on how many people you have at your disposal to work this project. You're not going to have an unlimited budget. And among those people on your team, they may not have the skill sets you need to get from start to finish. You're also going to run into personality conflicts among the people on your team. There are 2 ways to handle this. One, you can try to work around those conflicts, but that's only going to take you so far. The better way to do it is to actually work through those conflicts. Know also that some problems will take longer to solve than others, so you'll need to think through those problems ahead of time in order for you to hit your project deadline. Let's just take an everyday example. If you're a chef and a party of 8 comes into your restaurant and they place their food orders, you want all of them to be served at the same time. Now, different parts of the menu are going to take different amounts of time of preparation. So you'll need to start some of those things before you start others. In the same way with a project, there are many tasks, many problems to be solved. Some of those you may need to start earlier than others so that you actually get them all done by your project deadline. The second P, you're not a project manager, you're a people manager. The first thing to remember when being a manager of people is listening. You want to make sure that you hear people out. So your task is going to be to become a great listener. Part of being a great listener is not just hearing them, but actually understanding their challenges. That means you need to sit in the dirt with them in trying to help them figure out how to accomplish whatever challenge or task they're facing. One of the most important parts of being a people manager on a project is building community. And there are 3 primary ways you can build community. The first is to get everyone on board. Not everyone will be in favor of a project at the start of the project. That means you need to figure out how to get them to buy into the project. The second is getting everyone contributing. This is actually a way to get people to buy in if you can give them ownership of a part of the project, or if they will take ownership of the part of the project, that will allow them to be on board with everyone else. And the third is getting everyone aligned. Imagine if you were playing on a basketball team and half of your team wants to shoot at one basket, and half of your team wants to shoot at the other basket. You're not going to win the game. In the same way in a project, you want to make sure everyone is aligned toward the same goal. And the third P, you're not a project manager, you're a priority manager. This is the most difficult part of any project. Why? People will have competing priorities. The priorities are not always obvious, and each person will have something that's important to them. So you'll need to be able to manage that. In addition, circumstances will change, and that means you'll have to shift your priorities. It's important to be able to keep perspective. In terms of setting priorities, you always want to make sure you keep a couple things in mind. First of all, for whatever priority shift you're making, always determine the consequences. If you have to make a choice to prioritize one task over another, think in terms of the consequences to the business as well as the consequences to the people. Also, make sure that you play the long game. There's something called the Eisenhower matrix, and this helps to visualize evaluating whether something is urgent, whether it's important, whether it's a combination of those two, or whether it's neither. Applying the Eisenhower matrix to each task will help you to understand how to prioritize. Bottom line, always evaluate. There's a book called The One Thing, and the main question in that book is, what's the one thing you can do that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? So anytime you're trying to prioritize a task, think in terms of all of the tasks, which is the one that you can do first that will make the rest of the tasks either easier or completely unnecessary. And the fourth P, you're not a project manager, you're a particulars manager. When it comes to projects, some of the details can become endless and it's easy to get lost in the weeds. The important thing for you is to understand which details you need to obsess over. The first set of details that I would urge you to make sure that you obsess over is the gap analysis. On any project, you're going to do a gap analysis. That's simply the difference between where you are now and where you want to be after the project is over. Make sure you do that at the start of the project so that you don't get derailed in the middle of the project having to figure this out, or worse, having to backtrack because you didn't anticipate something. Next, you want to obsess over the descriptions and the scope of any task that's involved in the project. If you aren't meticulous in writing out your task descriptions and making sure those tasks are fully scoped, you will end up with a project that takes much longer than you anticipated because you will have many deliverables that will have to go back for reworking. And the third area of details that it's really important to obsess over is quality assurance and testing. No matter what you do with your gap analysis, no matter how complete that is, no matter how comprehensive the descriptions of your tasks are, if you don't have a good quality assurance system and rigorous testing in place, you're going to run into many issues and your project is not going to meet the deadline. When it comes to the particulars, when it comes to the details, it's important to be able to distinguish which to obsess over, but also which to let go of. And the way you do this is by having a deep understanding of the business model. In order to know which details to let go of, you need to understand how the business works, how it makes profits, essentially what is important to the business. This is going to help you distinguish between things that are necessary and things that are just nice to have. On a project I was working on for one of my clients, one of the ways we did this was we took every single task and we triaged it into one of three categories. First, compliance, because that was the most important thing for my client. Secondly, revenue. If it were something that was going to generate additional revenue, that took second place in terms of importance. And third was cost. And that would be something that just ended up costing the company money. The fifth P, you're not a project manager, you're a plan manager. And the important thing about managing a plan is to think strategically. Realize that your path to completing this project will not be a straight line. There are going to be many twists and turns and unanticipated things that come up. So it's going to be very important that you think through strategically how you're going to get through those twists and turns. One of the best ways to come up with a great plan is to get input, to get advice from other people, either people who have done something like this before you or other people in the organization who may have more domain knowledge or may have more authority in some way. Proverbs 15:22 says, "Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed." And essentially that means don't make plans all by yourself. Get input, get advice for other people so that the plans you make are the best plans possible. There is a difference between doing your best versus doing something the best it can be done. Another part of being a plan manager is that you're going to need to be able to set timelines. This is probably the thing that people most think about when they think about project management. However, I would argue that the real importance of setting the timeline is not to fit a certain number of tasks in a certain time window, but that it creates forward momentum. There's a popular saying that goes something like this: if you don't have a target you're aiming for, you'll hit it every time. And in this case, setting a timeline is going to help people to achieve more than they would have if you hadn't set that timeline. However, because many unexpected issues will arise during the course of a project, you're going to need to manage and flex those timelines as those things come up. And lastly, with being a plan manager, it's important to always consider your resources. Tony Robbins said, "It's not about your resources, it's about your resourcefulness." There's a project that I was working on recently for a client where my client needed to move hundreds of thousands of products from their current software platform into their new software platform. And there's no way for the users to do it. The vendor didn't provide a way. However, by writing some code, I was able to give the users an easy way using Excel to upload their products into the new system. And that's an example where we didn't necessarily have the resources on the team, but I was able to be resourceful and figure out a workaround. The 6P, you're not a project manager, you're a preparation manager. Being a preparation manager is all about preparing the team for what's coming next. And the key to this is setting expectations. Now, whether it's the workers or whether it's upper management or anyone in between, having wrong expectations is going to lead to frustration. So if you don't set realistic expectations, the whole team from top to bottom is going to become frustrated. Upper management will tend to want to push the project along faster. Workers will become frustrated because they feel like they're always under the thumb of upper management. And this overall is going to lead to low morale. Your goal as a manager of preparation on this project is to have a motivated team, not a mopey team. A mopey team, a miserable team, is going to be a drag on the project and will slow down the overall timeline of the project. Another important thing about preparation is that it relieves pressure and stress on people. One of the best ways to relieve pressure and stress in any project, you're gonna have meetings, you're gonna have work sessions. Make sure that you set this cadence ahead of time. If there's gonna be meetings, try to have regular meetings. If there are going to be work sessions, try to have as regular as possible work sessions, or at least the expectation of weekly or monthly or whatever you need work sessions. And overall, it's going to be on you to do your best to model patience. Software project in particular can become very lengthy. To get through that project without a lot of stress, without people being overwhelmed and frustrated, it's important to set the tone of patience. Number 7, you're not a project manager, you're a productivity manager. One of the main things you're gonna do as a project manager is assign tasks. And when it comes to tasks, there's something called Parkinson's Law. Parkinson's Law states that any task will fill the time allotted for it. So for you, it's going to be important to time box any task that you give. If you ask somebody for something, make sure that you also give them a time when you'd like that back from them. Now, let's say you've given someone something to do that's a week out. One of the most important things you can do as a productivity manager is to follow up. If it's a week out, it's okay 3 days in to check in and just see how's it going. Is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything you need help with? Are there any other resources you need? Sometimes, myself included, we just forget. We may have a million things on our plate to do, and without the follow-up, that task might get lost in the shuffle. Another thing as a productivity manager that you'll want to do is coordinate team members. Sometimes a task requires several people, and those people, as we mentioned, already have a lot on their plate. So if you take the time to go ahead and set up the meeting, set up the work session, whatever needs to be set up, that will allow those people to focus on getting the task done and will increase overall productivity. I would strongly urge you not to micromanage people. Instead, try to figure out how to motivate them. Some people are motivated when you give them responsibility. You give them a task to do, they feel great that they've had that responsibility put on them, and they go and do it. Some people like to work together with others as a team. So you may want to pair up a couple people to work on a project. Some people just want their hand held. They need to be told step by step what to do. So for each person, try to figure out what allows them to be most productive. Knowing how to get the most out of each person is going to help your project to move forward as fast as possible. Also, remember that procrastination is human. There's a book called Eat That Frog, funny title, I know, that says everyone procrastinates. The difference between high performers and low performers is what they choose to procrastinate on. So help people with that. If you notice people are procrastinating, help them to understand which of all the things they have to do are the most important. Finally, beware of burnout. Burnout is a real thing on any project. It can happen for a couple different reasons. One, someone having to do the same thing over and over, day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out, hopefully not year in and year out, that can lead to burnout. Another way people can burn out, some people tend to be very motivated, overfunction, high achievers, but they can only sustain that for so long. So at that point, you may need to step in and help them manage their schedule for them to be most productive. If you have any questions about going from programmer to project manager or project lead, leave a comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.